So the first part is just for you to introduce yourself,
Okay.
your name, your age, and where we are right now.
Mm, okay. Aloha mai. My name is Lilette Alberta Lilia Kala Yamamoto Subedi. So my ohana come from China and from these islands and Japan and from far away in Europe. So I'm a Hapalua Pake Hawaii. I'm very proud of that. Hawaii side is mixed with the Kepani. I always thought my dad was half Japanese, but I was mistaken when I met Upuna Tanaka from Maui, from Nation, right? Lahui. And he was 90 something when I met him. Isla brought him over to me when I was at Ka'ala Farm, and he told me that his father came over from Yamaguchi Ken with my grandfather, my great grandfather from Japan in the 1880s or so. And they were brought to work. They landed in Lahaina, were working on Molokai. And then when my great grandpa got sick, Yamamoto got sick, Tanaka found him and they ran away into Pelekunu, where there was at that time an honorary mayor who was German. So all the expatriates from all over the world were hidden in these little niches right throughout our islands. And of course, they married all Hawaii women. And so that's how I came to know. Because when I first met my grandpa, he was maybe, oh, no, I was about 7 or 8, and he was already half paralyzed. And I looked at him, and he looked to me like the old etchings of Kamehameha, that heavy set face and the heavy features. And I thought, he doesn't look Japanese to me. And then I found out because he's Hapalua Kepani Hawaii. And so my dad was only quarter, right? And all of this. So everything changed when you learn more about your ethnic heritage and your racial heritage. And then it justifies a lot because I believe our DNA carries everything that we live from and by. So those are my names. Mom's side is Chang, but she took the Yamamoto name when she married my dad. She was the first to marry outside of Chinese. So she set the tone for being non-traditional. And she married at 30, which was quite old back then. So I followed in her footsteps. I'm a Title IX baby. I did all kind of things, very non-traditional. So even how I came into things Hawaiian. When I was young, I did not want to be associated with anything Hawaiian because where we grew up, I came to Hawaii in 1958. I was about 3 years old. My dad had served in the Air Force, so I was made here but produced in Germany. And came when I was just about 3. My sister was born here. She's a very local girl, but doesn't look it. So because we're mixed, you know how it goes, right? She's the fair one with the freckles, the light eyes, the light hair. I look like this. That's our picture from when we were young. It's one of my artworks. So I was called Duda girl, black girl, shit girl, stupid girl, because we grew up in Makalimo Ili back then. Hoava Lane was the first place we really landed after my Chinese family moved away to the mainland in 1961. 1960, they were selling the old house. This is on Punch Bowl, where Prospect and Iolani meet. And my parents couldn't afford to buy my grandpa's house, so we moved into apartments. So we moved to Makalimo Ili. And we were just a stone's throw from Papakolea, right? So where my dad, some of his family was there, and other people we knew were from Papakolea. So being a young kid, we don't know the difference. And it was always nice, and people loved you. And where we lived in Chinese camp, all the Chinese loved us because they knew my mother and my grandpa and everybody. And when we moved to Makalimo Ili, it was primarily Issei Nisei Kepani. And so I was told with my last name, Yamamoto, you know Japanese, you know Yamamoto. So I just couldn't comprehend why, because that's the only name I knew. It took me years to find it. It was in high school and I had the epiphany. Oh, they were biased against me. All I knew was the anger, because I literally got swept out of my friend's house with the broom, with that shouting, you know Yamamoto. I put that my name. And plus when we would go to my dad's family's paina, classic, starts off real nice, then later on it goes down, then the Almo'olelo starts, and then the Hakaka starts. By the end of the night, the cops have raided, people have gotten arrested, they haul their asses off to jail. And my sister and I looked at that, we were appalled. And my father was the only one who went to college on the GI Bill. And so of his generation, he's the only one who had a bachelor's degree, and they thought he was high mucka mucka, and they kept demanding things. But we didn't have money either. We grew up like anybody else, struggling. My parents both worked and struggled, but we thought we were okay. But for those reasons too, my sister and I didn't want to have anything to do with being Hawaiian. Back then, it was just ugly. So now when all the kids are, yeah, Hawaii 808, I tell them the stories that depending where you lived, it's not like that for everyone, because people my age, some just loved it. You learned to dance young, you were in your culture, but not us. My dad, when he played ukulele, closed all the jealousy so nobody could hear. Years later, I learned he was a manaleo, that's why. And he was sent to Lahaina Luna after the death of his grandmother. He had been hanai to her. He's the fourth child of his mother and father. He was hanai to her because she was a kahuna nui of that area on Maui and of the clans in Maui. So he was her apprentice until he was hanai from birth. So he was with her for about 13 years. So he learned a lot in that time, right? Living the old way, totally off the grid, just off the aina. And when he was sent home because she was engaged in an akualele battle, which did not end well because she did die. And it was a fight over the water on the land. It was from her own sons who wanted to raise the pipi for money. And we've since also, lost the Kuleana land. They sold it back in 1988, which was really sad. So I don't like going to Maui because it's still physically pulls as well as emotionally pulls. And maybe it is the spiritual part, but psychologically, right, all of that happening, those things are real. So even though I'm a practicing Christian, I still know that God created us with all that he gave us. And it's true, the things we learn in nature is what he put there. So even our practices, our culture, are based solely on nature and instinctive knowledge. Those things never die. They're very much alive. And so it's so heavy, and it's still very hurtful when we go to Maui. When I used to work for the state and I would go to Maui for the colleges, if we drove around Waihe and Wai'ehu side, that was the grounds for, doing the whole hupu for our aumakua. And so I would always physically get very ill in front of everybody. Car sick, everything, just move me, take me away. So those things are still prevalent today. And then my own ailments today come from heavy stress, I will admit that. A lot of us go through the stress of not just our identity, but just everyday living. And I've learned to pick my battles, right? What I'm gonna fight for. So I did come back into the Hawaiian community. God has interesting plans. I did everything to be the artist that I wanted to be since I was 4. I wanted to be that bohemian in New York. I had planned to go, I had all my stuff ready to move to New York. And then my uncle got sick on the Chinese side, and I canceled all my plans, and I lived with him for 10 years, taking care of him until he died. This is my mom's sister's husband. And in the meantime, I go back and forth to my core family. So we were all very close. Mother, father, my mother's sister, her husband. And between them, they had 5 girls. I was the second. My oldest sister died when she was 25. Then I became kahiapo. And that's a lot of responsibility, and you take the brunt, everything in the family. So, it's the Chinese side, but they also had my dad. And it was a nice way to grow up. That was the kind of protective shell. But going back to my dad, I had learned from him later of why he was so strict with me. I had to learn to speak Pidgin when I was teaching at the lab school because I couldn't understand my students. And they would joke. And then I had this heavy Indian accent because total immersion, right? I lived there. That's all you do. You only speak the language when you're there. And, I was an anomaly to them. So I learned to speak Pidgin because, what are they saying? And so as I'm started with my dad, this is after my son was born. My son was born in 89. He unveiled all these things. He knew I was practicing a lot already because I got into Alulike by default. When was that? Well, Alulike came in 92, 93. But from earlier on, I would do things like I would dream and I would get up and I would write the things down and I would show it to him. It was all Olelo Hawaii, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. And he would always ask me, where'd you get this? And I said, I don't know. Someone came, the lady in white came and she told me to write it down. So what is this? And he recognized it, but he would never translate it. So I had all this stuff, but I didn't know what it was. And oh yeah, I didn't tell you how old I am. So I was born November 21st, 1955. I'm almost 68 years old. Yay, thank God I made it, another year. I'm just trying to get to 70. And it's been an interesting ride. So from Germany to Hawaii, pretty much raised in Hawaii. Early years in my formative years in the Makali-Mo'iliili area until 1971 when I was a junior in high school. Through the GI Bill, my dad bought a home. It's a Horita home in Momilani in Pearl City. So we lived in a house for the very first time for our family, not my grandpa's basement, but a real house. It was ours. And my parents were there for 46 years. And I spent most of my time with them, back and forth between auntie, uncle's house. So I grew up from high school time, from small kid time in Waipio Acres, which opened in 1959, 1960, because my parents would farm me out to auntie and uncle because they knew I needed space and I needed dirt. I needed really dirt and earth and rocks and trees and plants. So they would send me every weekend, every holiday I was with them. So I learned a lot about my Chinese culture. So I'm very Pake, as you can see. Very Pake and still very Hawaii. So the Hawaiian was always there. Plus I look like it, so you can't escape what you look like, right? And by default, what happened was I stayed from 77 to 87. He died in 88. But I had the opportunity to go back. I chose to go to graduate school after being out from my bachelor's for some time. I mean, I finished my bachelor's at 20.
Oh.
And I thought, I'm too young, I don't know anything. So I stayed in an extra year. UH used to have what was called the concurrent degree. So all I did was piggyback on it. So I have a BFA in painting and drawing. Then I did a BA in Western art history because I said, the Asian stuff, But I shocked the teachers because they knew I was heavy into studio. I was already an artist showing my work. I was already recognized in the community. And then I learned how political it was, so that sucked. And I said, no, thank you. But I went back to school, and it was there when I really started delving into religion, philosophy, history. And I wound up with Prithwish Neogi in the art department, in the art history department. And Neogi opened my eyes to so many things. While I was working, doing a lot of the religion and philosophy classes, I studied with Al Bloom for Religion of Japan, Dr. Cromwell Crawford, the half-caste, who was always hung up on being half-caste, but I did ethics with him. And in 1982, the Moonies, or the Unification Church, with Dr. Sun Myung Moon, wanted to sponsor this big thing called the Youth Seminar on World Religions because, he was under heavy scrutiny with the IRS saying, well, you're faith-based, but, you guys are doing this, you have so much money, da-da-da, and then the other side was you're a cult, da-da-da. So one day I walked into my Religion of Japan class. Dr. Bloom was talking, and my girlfriend says, hey, you like to travel? Yeah, Lilette. You should go talk to Dr. Bloom about this thing they have. They're going to go around the world and study world religions. That's just up your alley. You should go find out. It's paid for. Because I made a promise to myself when I was 18, every other year I would travel, no matter what. And God always made a way. No money, still go. So in 82, I was what now? I was 26. I'm going to be 27. Is that right? No. Yes, I was one of the oldies on the tour. So you either have to be an upper level baccalaureate student or a graduate student to qualify to be on the tour. You have to have your own solid background. You know, you have to be psychologically strong. So I went to see Bloom and he said, no, go see Dr. Crawford. Dr. Crawford will talk to you. So I went to see Cromwell and he said, oh, I already recommended you. You just need to write the essay. So I went, oh, cool. So I wrote my essay and I got in. From each of the 50 states, they chose one female, one male candidate. So that was the United States representation, 100 students. Then there were 250 students from every place else around the world. We all met in New York. Then we spent the next 7.5 weeks traveling around the world. So that's what led me to see India, where so many things seemed familiar to me. And I met people who impacted my life for the next couple of decades, and that got me into my work. So while doing that, I had met Prithvish Yogi. I decided to go into the study of South Asian art or Indian art. I never took any of the classes in my undergraduate work because I thought it was too busy, there's too much stuff, and it wasn't to my liking. I was raised on European and American culture. And so the European stuff, I was always shown where I was born, you know, and the places we went. I loved Italy and all of these things. We have artifacts. My parents had all these artifacts. So I had a new phase of life. So in 85 and 86, I went back to India on my own. But when I went there to do this study, it was an iconological and iconographical study on one specific temple in this region that's highly protected and prized by the Indian government. I had met on the tour in 82 the son of the man who was the head of the Archaeological Survey of India. So that's like our Secretary of Interior. And through him, I was given carte blanche to be out at the site and work, you know, as an anthroarchaeologist, pseudo-anthroarchaeologist to do my work on this temple. So it was out there where I lived with a Muslim family for my eating because I was already only veg. But I stayed in the Archaeological Survey's field house, which had the office. So the office was staffed by Hindus. The living was all Muslim. The site is Buddhist, Jain, Hindu. So it's really Hindu first, right? Brahminical. Then the Jinnas came up, and then the Buddhists came up at about the same time. So
Where in India?
this is in Maharashtra at Ellora. So Ellora is very well known. Aurangabad is known in the areas. There's Ajanta caves, and if you go into Bombay, there's Elephanta Island. You know, so I got to do all of that. But I went out there, and people did not speak English. So I picked up what I could pretty quickly. I have a nice affinity for language, still comes with me today. Came back home, studied really hard that first year Hindi. My professor loved me. Sharma ji, who's the one that did our rock in Wahiwa, right? So I just go, oh, Sharma ji. So I can see why you think it's a Shiva Ling, but it's the same around the world. That's another thing, right? We learn about the universality amongst beliefs of indigenous peoples. You cannot take that away from indigenous people. But while I'm at the temples and I'm looking at the things, the last big study of the temple was in 1955, the year I was born, so it was ironic that I'm there. And while I'm looking at the steles and documenting them, both drawing them, measuring them, doing all of this and doing the interpretation, I'm looking at them and I go, why are these stories familiar? And they were like the mo'olelo my dad used to tell me based on all our mo'olelo Hawaii. And so I'm looking at them going, wow, this is really wild. This is crazy. So I would come home and I would talk to him. And my dad saw this thing on PBS and he goes, look, these people, they look just like us. They look like us now. We look like them. So he's looking at the Dravidians, which now populate mostly South India and into Sri Lanka. Right? And Lanka is the name for the place where the big battle, Mahabharata, took place.
So you kind of fit right in. You were there.
I did.
You look different.
But they were amazed because I'm so big, right? The Indian men were like this to me, literally. I mean, they're tiny people. My friend whose father was the head, I never met his father in person. We just corresponded by writing. Hard to use the phone out there, and I had no cell phones at all back in the day. But through my friend who was in the US studying at IIT, the Illinois Institute of Technology, second to MIT really, there were so many South Asians there, but we were definitely on the south side of Chicago. So I had that part of America. That was really cool. Yeah. And this friend of mine came from a family, he's the oldest of three brothers. All three of them are super minds and they're all in IT and this stuff. So this guy was finishing his PhD, but he had destroyed his retinas when he served in the Indian Air Force. I met him on the tour and we had gotten into a lot of discussions. So I love theological and eschatological discussions. So we often did that at night. And you have people from all walks and all venues in education just talking story, right? But a lot of us had this heavy bent toward looking at religion and philosophy. So one is man-made, one is transient based on our experiences and spirituality. So it's just a nice melding. And it's so artistic in a way because it's aesthetic. So I would communicate with Sri, and while I was there, I was picking up the Marathi, going, how I learned these low-class things, because he speak Kanda in Mysore, where he's from. But I just felt a nice affinity. I was as comfortable in India, though socially and hygienically, it was so opposite, antithetical to what I knew growing up here. I mean, very different. And then I was as comfortable there as I had been in Italy. In '82, we also went to Italy because, the seat of the Roman Catholic Church and all of this. But in Italy, I only spoke French. I refused to speak English because I'm brown. So if you speak a language not English, and then they don't look at you, as long as they don't see your passport, as long as they don't think you're American, they treat you very nicely. At that time in '82, if they see American, they're not nice to you at all. So I didn't speak any English. I spoke French. And that was really cool. So this, I believe, is the basis for a lot of us as Hawaiians, because Hawaiians have always just accepted, right? An opportunity to become better, to be stronger, to see the world, to learn more. We see something interesting. What is this? What is this? We question and we want to learn. There's that initial thirst for learning. There's a quest for knowledge because we know it's always greater than we are. That's intrinsic, I think, in all of us, intrinsic. And that's why I go back to the DNA, right? Our dana, as Auntie Pua says, our dana. We're coded in our dana. So language comes back in our dana. So when I learned my dad, sorry to jump, but to me it's a train. When I learned that my dad was a manaleo, and I learned that the history of how he got sent from his tutuma back to his family, and how they didn't understand him and they were afraid of him, and they exorcised him for 10 years to exorcise out Protestants, right? Protestant Hawaiians exorcised him to get all this stuff out. Because Kahuna Nui also practiced ana, right? Kahuna Nui is all the arts. So they were afraid of him. And then they shipped him off to Lahaina Luna, which is on the other side of the island. Our family is from Huelo, the place where the dog's tail wags, right? Huelo, that's what it's known of, just past Kenai. And so when they put him at Lahaina Luna, he was one of 2 year-round boarders there. And no family went to visit him. He did not speak English. He was beaten for 2 years, maybe a little more, until he learned and grasped English. So consequently and subsequently, when I was born to him all these years later, I was raised in a household between he and my mother and spoke only standard English. You don't use contractions that much. There's no pidgin. You spoke very proper English. My mother read a lot to me because she stayed home. She didn't work while she was in Germany. She stayed home. And my dad was doing his thing. Um, but this is, in hindsight, I learned that I was truly an oral learner from my dana, from being poe Hawaii. They didn't diagnose us as dyslexic back then. They didn't know what it was. When we came to Hawaii, and I was later put into Royal School, um, I couldn't learn to read or write because I couldn't make any sense of the glyphs. It didn't make any sense to me. And even though I had a wonderful teacher in kindergarten who turned out later we were related to the Goodnesses from Maui, well, hello. You never know who you're related to. I couldn't learn from the flashcards, A for apple, they had a picture. I could sing the song, the alphabet song, because I heard it. So I was rote learning. But if you read to me, I can tell you the story. I can tell it back. So my mother read a lot to me from the time I was a baby to the time we came and continued to read to me. And so I was put in the Magpies group for reading. Then the next year was the Ravens group. These are all blackbirds because they're ugly blackbirds, right? According to American standards. So we had the Houghton Mifflin readers, the see spot run, see this, see that. So I couldn't read. And when we moved to Mo'ili'ili Macaulay, I went to Luna Little School at the end of my first grade year. And it was a teacher there, Mrs. Ng, who then saw my difficulty. She saw I was very quiet, very shy, didn't like to talk to anybody, couldn't read or write, but I would draw. So I spent all my time doodling because I didn't understand what was going on. She pulled me out from recess. She pulled me out after lunch, and when people were taking naps, she would work with me on the blackboard, taking the 5-line thing. Remember, they used to draw to write music? Well, she did that. So then I had the 5 lines in the middle line. She taught me, she goes, we're gonna draw this line. So that's how I learned to write the alphabet and sound it out. She taught me the alphabet and she taught me how to read it. So it was through her. And I had her again in second grade. And so I went from being illiterate, ironically, to one day winding up at UH in the College of Ed, where I didn't graduate from, where I'm teaching, where I'm researching and writing and doing all these things on education and saying, this is why our system is screwed up, because you're not teaching according to how people learn, right? And making that link between home culture and school culture. Mm-hmm. So all of this comes together because that's our lives. As meandering roads go, we go with the roads. So when I got to back to Hawaii for the 1980 tour, World Youth Seminar on World Religions, I needed another job because I had left my contracting job with Department of Army. So for a little while, I did a stint at the lab school. Kathy Kuroda, who's a well-known entertainer here in Hawaii, she went to Broadway for a while. Kati, she goes by Kati, Kati Kuroda. She left her position as art teacher, so my friend called me in. I got hired as an art teacher there. I taught kindergarten through 6th grade, painting, drawing kind of thing. Then that ended. I went back to work with U.S. Department of Army, this time as a NAFI, a non-appropriated funds person. Still continued to teach arts and crafts. I set up a fine arts program for them and was doing all kind of stuff. I did the textiles, I did leather craft, painting and drawing, ceramics, this pouring stuff, and all of this. So multifaceted, multifunctional. And that's
about your activism.
That's what we do. So all of this fits in because later in life, I get involved with Hawaiians by default. I work at Alulike. There I'm exposed to the Hawaiian community. There I'm forced to be in the Hawaiian community. So, I still had this bias. But then I'm looking and I realized, I look just like these people. It was shocking to me. I look, through our eyes, we see the world. So I started to hear, and they look at me and they would, "Olelo Hawaii, olelo wale no." And I said, excuse me, but could you please speak English? And they would just smile and "Olelo wale no." And after a while, I learned that if I just sat there, I understood what they were saying, like most people do when they hear their language is spoken. So I started to understand them and I would reply in English. So they would talk, we would have conversations. And then I went to an Ahaolelo at Kamehameha School, same thing, I didn't take the PPL, but I sat there and I could understand. So we would have conversations, I would hear it in Hawaiian and respond in English. So through that, and I was still with the state director's office on Voc Ed. My tenure ended there because a person on sabbatical came back. So I got bumped. They wanted to keep me, but they couldn't bifurcate the role. So I was the first Indigenous person to serve in the role of State Sex Equity Coordinator through the Carl Perkins Act. And I came out of industrial arts, not home ec. Like mostly it's populated by women. Each state had a representative plus Puerto Rico. So I was the first brown, not a black person, but a brown person coming from the wood shop, being what they thought was local. So representative, not another poe haole, because a woman whose place I took was haole. And I was welcomed into that circle. I got trained by some of the lawyers who wrote the accountability books for the Perkins Act, so I got a lot of training. So I worked well being a fiscal manager for Fed monies. So having that knowledge, then director found me a job at Alulike because it's Voc Ed, but it was a native Hawaiian Voc Ed. He said, they need you. You'd be a great mentor. You're Hawaiian, you're female, you're non-traditional, go and do this. So I went, big step down in pay, right? Because I thought, oh, sex equity coordinator, man, state job, this is so cool. I mean, it was embedded in the UH system. So, there was a cakewalk. I thought this is the dream job, but I got bumped. So went to Alulike. I took this guy's place who was not good at his job, who just liked to wala'au with all the people, didn't take heed of the government. And this is the US government with our tax money being put back to help our community. And we were in danger at that time. This was then known as Alulike's Native Hawaiian Voc Ed program. And UHCC was the larger part of the program. There was secondary ed, post-secondary ed, and adult ed. In Alulike, adult ed was all Alulike programs. Secondary was selected programs in the DOE schools. Post-secondary was the UHCC system. Joyce Sonoda was still the chancellor there, the Dragon Lady. So I got to know Joyce in that capacity because I sat with the council and all of this. We did Native Hawaiian Voc Ed in Hawaii. So we got about 2.5% of the monies from the feds for that. So during my time doing this work and working in the community colleges and then working in the communities where we were recruiting our students to come to college, right, to matriculate. These are all non-traditional, first generation college students. We're looking at the retention rates and attrition rates of Hawaiians in the university because Hawaiians and Filipinos comprise the smallest number. It still hasn't changed, much to my despair. Because what we did with the federal monies were all pilot programs, and of course the state never did standardize them as they're supposed to, right? The state never uses the damn government money in the ways that it should be done. So in the Hawaiian community, I started to get wind of this. So like I said, I started to recognize that I look just like these people. Not they look like me, I look like them. I like these people. They're not bad like the people I saw growing up. Very gentle, right? All the aunties and uncles with so much knowledge, but there are a lot of things I picked up. And like I said, with the things of my dreams and the writing, I started to understand where it came from. So my heritage and that intrinsic knowledge. When we talk about na'auao, it's that intrinsic knowledge, and a lot of things started waking up. So the more I got involved in the cultural pieces, because we relied heavily upon our Native Hawaiian culture to reach people, our Hawaiians, to come to college, telling them it's not just for everybody else, you belong here too, this is yours. Plus, a lot of the university system is located on our old former crown lands or ceded lands. So go back, be there. I started learning more and more about all our places, how the encroachment was occurring, because I could see it, but I didn't fully understand it. Then I started to listen to people, Kiana-san, everybody. It was young, the movement, Kalahui, the Trask sisters were always around, Luli Kala. So, I got to know people along the way listening. And my dad had said, hey, just don't get involved in that sovereignty shit. Oh, no, Dad, don't worry. I'm not like that.
Did he say that in the 90s or did he say that like in the 70s when the Renaissance started?
Well, the Renaissance started in the 70s. I was nowhere near things Hawaiian.
Because you were already on the trip basically halfway through that anyway.
Yeah, in 82, I went on that world trip, but my life was still, growing. My path was getting set. And so I came back through Things Hawaiian through India and then coming back, working for a big federally funded program for the state and then into the Native Hawaiian nonprofit. So I get to know like Haunani Apoliona. I became pretty decent friends with her only because I was never afraid to speak my mind. And she goes, oh, everybody's afraid to come talk to me because she's the ED, right? I go, why should I be afraid? I mean, I didn't understand why people were afraid. I said, we're managing federal money. I need to tell you if something's going wrong. So through her, I met Haunani Bernardino, and we became very close friends until she died. But through all these people, I learned more and more and got into Things Hawaiian. When I left Alulike, I was hired as the first executive director for Ka'ala Cultural Learning Center, Ka'ala Farm, Eric Ma. So I had met him because when I was at Alulike, I was one of 3 Hawaiians in my unit. The other 2 were the clerical helpers. I was the only Hawaiian administrator, mid-management administrator, and a female on top of that. And I managed to save the monies from the feds. When I left, our take was 2.3 million a year for the state, Native Hawaiian Vocat dedicated monies. I managed 1.2 to 1.8, all for the community colleges because my program we built up was strong. And I set up a contract system. I audited, when I first went in on loan from OSDBE to Alulike, they said, you gotta help us. So I went through all the amounts of paperwork. I audited and found to the penny where the money and how the money was spent in the UH system. They essentially put it on a block, everybody came and took it. Mm-hmm. And then they borrowed willy-nilly back and forth. So I traced all that money in a matter of like 4 months. So I did my forensic accounting. It's not my field, right? Mm-hmm. I'm an artist. I should know nothing. But Hawaiians are resourceful. We know how, my dad says, as long as you know how to read, as long as you know how to talk to people, as long as you're not all uppity in their face and you don't act like an ass, you will get to know people. They will tell you things. So that's exactly what I did. Learned, read, studied, and like I said, I got good training in Washington and learned how to use all these OMB circulars and that to do this job. So I essentially saved Alulike from having all the monies rescinded from all the years, right? They would rescind every cent from the get-go. So that didn't happen. They never rescinded it. Our program was strong, built a good UHCC program. And during that time is when I became more Hawaiian, more aware of who I was and my place in the Hawaiian community.
Did you feel at that time that you were, like, would you label yourself an activist at that time when those things were happening? Or do you consider yourself an activist?
I did not consider myself an activist. I considered myself a student and someone vested in my heritage and my place of heritage. I knew that I was indigenous, but now I respected it even more. And I learned more about a lot of things. I was one of 3 people who wrote the proposal to bring the WIPSE here, World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. Back in 1999, we brought it to Hawaii. So in 96, through monies that we got through the feds, I got it allocated so we could take a contingent of Hawaiians to the meeting in Albuquerque. Because 3 years before that, I had gotten the money somehow it got approved from USAID to send Kamuela Chun and Peter Hano to the WIPSE in 93. They came back in Wollongong. So I said, they came back and said, oh, that you gotta get us in the next one. We gotta take our Hawaiians. You gotta meet indigenous people from around the world. You gotta learn. Our fight is the same all over the world, though at different stages, right? And we need to be together. And at that time, everything was going on in the World Court, and Kiana was out there testifying and doing all of this, and finally we were recognized. I was hanging with a friend of mine, Didi Akwai, who's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but I loved her.
She wrote our thing.
Yes, I know. She was talking with me about it when she was writing. And we went to Halava together. She said, oh, Tita, you gotta come. And my son was very young then. And I was married to a Nepali man, so you can imagine there's more cultural interest and disinterest. So anyway, through the Halava time, I told her, let me pray on this before I go with you. Talk to my dad about it. Let me pray. So I went in and met the aunties, right? They all come from Waianae, everybody has a home. Then they kept saying, baby, we're not homeless or houseless, we're here to just give our people a chance to see this. We cannot stop progress. So that was a very key message from them. So them, I considered activists, right? They took an active stand. They were pa'a in it. They knew the history, they knew the mo'olelo, and they just wanted to share, and they were right. Don't lose the knowledge. Just pass it down, because we've lost so much already. So I kept doing things like that, getting involved in different places. And then when I left Alulike and went to Waianae, where my father had been teaching in the UHCC system for years, I felt more at home in Waianae, because now we all look like each other. And I just felt very at ease moving around, doing what I do. Things came very naturally. Through Antipua in 96 is when I was first exposed to Oli. So then I started learning, and we learned the old style. You start 1, 1, 1, up, wrong, go all the way back. For hours we did it so we could be pa'a the next day to come in and march. And that's how we introduced ourselves from Hawaii. And it was a moment of pride where I really felt, wow, and I'm so proud of all these people. Our students, a majority of them had never left Hawaii Island. When they came to Honolulu Airport, they were all panicked. And they saw me, oh, Auntie, this place is so big. Oh, this is nothing. When we got to Colorado, they were all spazzed out. By the time we got to New Mexico, it was like this. And then I took them to my Zuni family, the reservation, where they got to see that and meet and see our cultures come together. And the Zuni were doing the same thing with education and fighting diabetes, just like we were doing, fighting all our health issues, dealing with housing issues. Health, housing, and proper nutrition were big things. Mm-hmm. And in Waianae, I saw that too, right? You have fast food row, as you know. You always put fast food places in all the oppressed, poor neighborhoods. And that's how you make people more sick and kill them, like we are dying. And so I continued to work through Ka'ala, was able to handle the protocols, got to know Uncle Eddie and Keali'i, his cousin. And it just, I don't know how else to explain it. It was just naturally occurring. It was my path to take that I finally accepted. That's how I view it. And yes, at Ka'ala, we were very active in things like fighting against the Mauna Kea outriggers at the time. I learned about the contracts, how the UH was the one who dropped the ball when it was supposed to be just that one, and it got to 3, and then pretty soon you knew they were building outriggers. So I got to know people. I went to testify. I testified against this core bridge, which I now see being built, that ugly monstrosity out there on what was, could have been restored, prime ag lands, right? I'm still involved in ag lands, a fight. And it was at Ka'ala where I learned the term through Eric Ma. We don't call ourselves activists. We are proactivists. Proactivists. And I love that because, yes, we are positive. We're moving forward. It's ho'omau and just knowing where we want to go.
So what would you say is the, when you look back on all of these things, because it's a whole bunch of different things.
It is.
And it took so long it was a journey to arrive at even just this part of it.
So it congeals with makua.
Yeah.
When I went in 2000 in January to take over the helm from Hua, um, I had to take care of all the federal stuff first and then running the house, setting them up fiscally, setting them up programmatic. Eric Ma is a good person, graduated from Kamehameha schools, doesn't speak Olelo Hawaii, doesn't know Hawaiian protocol, any loina, not doing any of that when I met him. I mean, in the professional sense of being his boss. So like I said, I met him very cursorily when we went up to make a Hawaiian field trip. And then so now I'm there at Ka'ala and I get involved in all things. Water, I gave the name Mohala Ikawai to our water pro-activist group in dealing with the water issues, especially up Mauka where the Ka'ala Cultural Center is. So I just naturally got involved in the flow of everything happening. When I came, they were working on establishing the first makahiki. They asked me to come to closing, and I told them, and Momi was there, right, with Vicky. And I told them, I cannot come in at halftime, so I cannot do the closing. They said, but you represent Ka'ala, and Eric goes. I said, I cannot go in because culturally, in my family, you don't go into something you didn't start. You cannot. It's coupled to us. So see, there's so much more that my father had been conveying. My father passed in 2001. So there was so much I had been learning in those last years since 89 when my son was born. My father was unveiling things, because he said he had told my mother to tell me. He never spoke directly on certain things. Tell that she's the one. Because I was asked by David Lovell, who was our counselor, my contractor's counselor out at Hawaii Community College, if I could come one day. It was a political thing. Danny Noy was sponsoring this Hawaiian Health Fair. And I had worked on Kavika. It was just person to person. I lomi him, but in our family it's called limavela. So I lomi him because his headaches were bad. And I told him, you gotta go home and sleep. He slept the whole night and then he didn't have recurring headaches for a long time. I said, that's our medicine. It's called limavela. So then he asked if I could come do that at this fair at Hilo in Campus Center. And I had to ask my dad, can I go do this? Because we never practice outside of the family. So he said, oh yeah, you can go. So I went and did it. Nothing special. I didn't have a table, nothing, no oils. I just would go and, can I heat uwai? So it's the water fountain in the bathroom, cold water every time cleaning. I knew how to do that because you got to uki everything. So I'd been a practitioner for a while in the family through my father. And when I finished that, I got back home, Pro City. My dad's talking to me about that experience and I told him. The next day, as I'm walking past my parents' house, where I lived in Ohana in the back, my mother goes, Lilette. She calls me from the door. Lilette, Daddy wants me to tell you something. Well, what is that? She said, oh, Daddy wants to tell you you're the one. What does he mean? And that just sent a chill down my spine. And I just said, don't worry, Mom, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it. Tell him I said, okay. Not thank you. Tell him I said, okay. You're the one. Oh, I cried and I prayed and I prayed. No, because I understood the kuleana that came with it. So there was so much more I had to learn, right? So going to that meeting about the makahiki, sitting in, and I'm listening to their chants and I'm kind of learning with them. Oh, you got to come to closing. I cannot come to closing. So I explained that. Just like in our family, no women blow the pu. There's no kahi pu or pu kahi who are wahine in our families. That's forbidden. Oh, but a lot of people, no. So Walter B would blow her, The grandchildren all learn, not me. I refuse because I was told you do not do that. Women do not do that, especially with what my great-grandmother taught. No, I cannot come. I'll come next year. So in 2001 Makahiki, that fall, I went into Makua. I had gone on the day trips, accesses to check it out, and I was very moved by it. All of us are moved when we come back because we're called into these places. Just like I was moved when I went to Halava, and Didi and I climbed up the mountain and we found stuff, right? And you don't touch and you don't say. Uh, so I just was getting back in touch with being Hawaii. And that never goes away. So I fully understand that. I may not have been born here, but I was made here. My father is from this place. His line goes back generations upon generations, like so many others, right? From the first people. And it's never going to leave. So my son has it in him. So even though he's still angry with the Hawaiians with their many bracelets and the big SUVs and the TVs, and they're saying, give me back my land, but the hands are out, they're not working for it. He goes, that's not Hawaiian. So he wants nothing to do with Hawaii and Hawaiians. And Ma, that's from you, that's why, kind of a thing. But he'll come around, we all do, just like me. So I was kind of old already. I was 45 when I took over the helm and became ED at Ka'ala. So middle age, right? 45 prime if you're gonna live to 90. And like I said, I learned a lot there. So when I went into Makahiki, it was very different. And my little cadre of women, Isla brought it up at Walter B's service because we were very well known back then, the four of us, Momi Kamahele, Leandra Y. Rodriguez, and Walter B. Aldiger, and myself. We were known as the Tita Hina Owaianai because we would go out during any one of the 3 full moon nights each month and we would cook on open fire. So we had permission to make open fire on the beach, us. And we would sit, and you had to be native to come with us, to sit with us and to eat with us and to just talk story. We would talk about everything, our families. No kane either, no kane. Just women. But you had to be of koko. And we would practice chanting, and we would do our huaka'i. Before Makahiki, we would make these huaka'i to different places to identify in the chants, right, where these places are. Momi is the only one who had Hawaii Nui roots. We all had Maui roots, so that's another thing that cemented our relationship. And of course, the Waianae Coast is strong Maui. There's that strong history. So Leandra, Walter B., and I would often participate on the bus tours, right? From UH, they would come down and we would give them all that of this place and talk about Maui and the practices and the names like Kiawaula and why and this and that and the Pele, the Pele star, Pele and Hiaka stars and all of this. So it just came naturally. And of course, I'm still studying and learning more to make it right. And I started collecting books and reading and looking at whose books, who these aficionados were. So Auntie Pukui was good, all of this, and just meeting people in the community.
Because what would you say, like looking back on that experience, what would you say is like, not just the impact on you, but the impact of the work that you were doing with everyone?
I'm proud to be part of the group, just a part of the group. We're all integral in it. That we stopped the live fire training in Makua. It's 20 years, right? This year is the 20th anniversary of stopping live fire. I contributed by way of when there was a big burn, when they wouldn't listen, the US Army wouldn't listen that year. And we told them, don't have your fires, don't do the controlled burn. It's not going to control, it's going to go out. And it burned, 4,000, maybe more than 4,000 acres all the way up. All the replanting, reforestation that had been done, all the way up to the bog right at Ka'ala. And they were so apologetic, but I composed that, I haku that oli ue. And when Uncle Kamana heard it at the gate, because they all know the Pilila, everybody, right? They know each other. And I had made that only because William Isla asked me, Tita, can you please haku and oli for us to go in? And we had a strategic meeting, and I said, this is what we want to do, because the Poihale, they understand this. Black is their mourning color. So let us wear black. Minimally black kihe. If we want, we should wear our kekepa, everything, right? Black. So they will know that we are mourning the hurt that they've done to Makua. And I composed this chant, and it's that heavy cry that away days are really long. So the day it was happening, I had my money, so I couldn't go. I said, I will be on the side of you. I'll call it out. You guys got to carry it in the voice because we had like 3-4 days for them to learn it. And when I got to the gate, because I couldn't lead it, I just let them all go in. Isla took them in. He was alakai for that. And I kept chanting and calling like that. And I would do the primary wailing while they chanted all the words over me, right? Because you have to have the way and then people saying the words. And Uncle Walter stopped me. He said, I haven't heard this since I was at Lili'u's funeral. Who did this? And I said, oh, Uncle, oh, wow, no. And he goes, oh my God. And he was just, his face was streamed with tears, and that really got me. It still evokes a lot because it's all that generational pain, right, that comes up. And of all places, Makua. And it represents so much to who we are and why I lost my own identity as Hawaii and why so many others have and why we're so angry because we did not understand all the usurpation that occurred over all the years, all the assimilation that occurs. And in education, I do not tolerate assimilation. I do not. I look at accommodation. Our culture has a long history and practice of accommodating, and that's how we were usurped. Just like other indigenous cultures around the world, it's about accommodation. It's about offering equal respect. We can only go up or down from that. And when you are betrayed, you know you are betrayed. Once you are betrayed, you will always fight back and never trust that enemy again. And we know when there are enemies, and we know when there are enemies and some kind of make a bend to try to come around to you. You can recognize that. And those people we work with. For those staunch opponents, no way. We don't need to talk to them either. And they may talk down to us, they may talk at us or shout at us, and our way, unlike Haunani Trask, when I finally met her at Top Story, she goes, oh, you're so quiet though, but how do you know all this kind of stuff? Where you been? I said, I've been here all the time. I don't need headlines. I'm not a headline grabber. I'm one of all of us. We should come like the water. We ebb with the flow, right? Ebb and flow, ebb and flow. And when it gets time, then we're the tidal wave that comes and pounds you. That is how we work. That is how we work. So you learn how to come through the back door, through the window, any way you can. And we learn, we were taught through assimilation. We were taught how to usurp. So we use it in a proactive way, not to hurt anybody else, but to reclaim what is rightfully ours, to still do it with respect. And some of the kupuna used to tell me that, you know, we grew up in a time, and this is my dad's generation or even older, half a generation older than my dad's time. You should never hate anyone. You save hate for your mortal enemies. So even today I use the term I have great disdain for, because I'm schooled in English and I have a vocabulary. I have great disdain for blah, 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 blah. And it's true. Disdain is not as harmful as hate is. Hate kills us. Hate is what gives us stress. Hate is what almost killed me through the stress I had, right? That sent me to the hospital, that almost sent me to my death back in 2020. So all of this comes up through being in this place, to explaining what Aina is, that Aina is our entire environment, all that feeds, it's the environment. People think only the papa is Aina. No, Aina is the sky, the three heavens, if you want to be Christian about it, all the way up, everything around us, right? The ocean, the mountains, the sand, the earth, everything. That is Aina. All that feeds and sustains us, that is Aina. We are made up of elements of Aina that come from the heavens. And when you learn all of that and you feel it, when you chant and you know it, you just know it in your bones. That's the connection we have. And we find each other and we work together. How did I meet you? Was way back too, no? In one of some group or something that I saw you at Kapiolani College, and we would run into each other here and there. So over the years, and we're always doing our things. Everybody, we're doing our thing. That's it. Nobody can really take claim of I'm doing all of this. It's me. There's no such thing as aggrandizement. There shouldn't be. And those who have big egos or make big body, they don't last too long until they fall down on their own accord. On their own accord. What goes around comes around. So even for us in Hawaii, I truly believe that Hawaii will come to good terms after a lot of bad things are wiped away. For a long time, this has been my little soapbox. As stupid as it sounds to a lot of people, it's so important to me. From the time I was young, I would ask my father, why do they say Hawaii or Hawaii? Hawaii. Because when I went to India and they asked me where I was from, I said Hawaii. And they said, what is that? These are the family that I'm living with. They had never seen a map. So the second year I brought a map and I showed them where Hawaii was, where India is. I showed them where Mecca is, all of this. I brought pictures and they laughed. And then I had been learning my Hindi and Sanskrit. So I learned that Hawaii in Sanskrit means you come from the air. E is the locative. Hawa means the air. Hawa. Makani. And then in Olelo, Hawaii, Hawa is anything described as having been desecrated by filth and by feces. Hawa. Like Heva, but this is Hawa. As if defiled by feces. Hawaii, the place defiled by feces. And look what's become of us with all the drugs, the violence, the ill health, everything that's so nasty that we're battling every day in our nonprofits and everything. Right? Mental health issues. All of this is health. So he said, don't bother with it. I said, but every night on the news, and this is the news of Hawaii. I said, but they're calling it the wrong name. They're bringing bad things to this place. It's Hawaii. And Kalai Kapu Okalani said it nicely. I was at the Native Hawaiian Leadership program that UHELO used to always have every year. So that was part of my thing, right, with the UHCC group. I always had my students go there. All of our students went, and we went, and I kept learning. And Kalai Kapu is Haunani Apuleona's cousin, right? And he's a practicing kahuna of his own right, la'aulapa'au though, and good things, versus Kamaki, who was practicing ana and did not know how to do it. That was dangerous, very dangerous. That's why Auntie Aggie got sick. But Kawai Kapu was the one who said, if you want to learn Hawaiian, all you kids who don't olelo Hawaii, go get the music you love to sing, because you guys all learn to sing, so you're mimicking the words. And then take a look at the lyric sheet and then follow. And then get a dictionary and look it up. And then listen to everybody. You know what? Pretty soon you're going to recognize you can speak Hawaiian. So that I thought, that's exactly right, because that's like me. I heard it, and then I could understand it. I didn't study. I've never had a Hawaiian class, formal Hawaiian class.
That's what I did with Japanese too.
Yeah, well,
the people there.
Yeah, so you any language you can learn, right? And when you're immersed in it, you sure do pick it up, because that's all it is. You pick up you mimic. It's natural. The body does that. The brain and the body do these wonderful things. And so he said, Hawaii, ha, that life breath that comes. So we all know about ha. Wai, the purest, freshest water, the element of any life. You cannot live without wai. So true. You can go without food for a long number of days, and then after that, not so good. But if you don't have water, you are going to die, because you need water to make your blood run through your veins, for your organs to work, everything. And if you have that, then you have energy. You can go look for food. No mea ai. And E, the highest of the highest being, Hawaii. So the highest of the highest being gave this beautiful life breath to us in this place where we have the best, freshest water that sustains all life. And we are the only indigenous group in the world, right, whose place name and people's name are exactly the same. We are Hawaii. We come from Hawaii. We live in Hawaii. So whether you say Hawaii or Hawaii, it's just a dialectical difference, and we should honor that. And when we come back to truly understanding where we come from, even with all the other places in the world, we honor all of that. This place is still extremely sacred and special. We are unique throughout the world. I haven't traveled to every place in the world, but I have traveled extensively. Hawaii, even for people who don't know it, know that something is different about us when they meet us. We always find a way. We always find a way. So Makua has provided that. And we would see all kinds of ho'ailona there and on our huaka'ihele. We would hear it in the wind. We went one year to Hawaii Nui with Momi. We walked out in the evening to watch the lava flow into the ocean. There was Pele in all her beautiful glory, her angry glory. And we went beyond the barriers and we did our hula or makahiki out there in our boots and everything, but we were dancing. Nobody was around us. When we turned around to leave, all these people were there, these turai. Poehali, they had come out. But we had been chanting. And when we learn to chant, we chant into the wind, right? You have to chant so your voices can be heard. It's like how I would chant for the kids in the morning. I would do the Shema, and then I would do just a real easy chant, either E Homai or whatever, so that they can hear it. But we would chant into the wind. And we would say, and we learn, right? You do na'au makua. So many Hawaiians don't know you got to close with hemu because you have to send it back and close the vortex. This is why there's a lot of heva. There's spiritual heva in our community because people open. Don't send it back. You got to close it. My dad always said, you got to close. You open a door, you close the door when power, because that side is very powerful and a lot of bad things come in with the good things. So you got to know. And it's like that with every culture around the world. And Auntie Pooh is the one who taught us Heimu. She taught it first for the guys who restored Kaneaki. That was another epiphany for me. When I joined Ka'ala, I was part of the Hawaiian Studies program at Waianae High School because Eric Ma folks had been fostering and they helped found that within the Galano. Poehali, but she put Olala Hawaii. She was the teacher out there. The kids loved her. Very brash, in your face. Married to a Hawaiian Filipino man who was just very quiet, but very Hawaiian. And her heart was truly Hawaiian. And she meant well. She wanted the kids to know their culture. She taught them how to oli. She wanted them to pay attention, to be proud of who they were, not just some kid from Waianae, oh, you guys no good. It's no, you be proud. And when I went with the kids, we took them on a 3-day conference. We entertained the teachers, the kupuna and the DOE. So Ka'ala Farm put this on for the DOE. And we had people come from all over to talk story, to lead the workshops and this. But we went up to Kaneaki, and while I'm standing there, and Walter B and I are just getting to know each other, but she knew my dad well for over 20 years already, so we knew her in the family. And she and I were standing there, and she goes, man, you can feel Kane. I said, he's over there. And we turn around, it's the big Pohakua Kane, right? And then as I'm looking, I go, oh my God, Walter B., I remember this place. When we came back to Hawaii, back in 1960 or so, my dad drove us all the way out. This is when still had gravel road coming into Nanakuli. It was not always a paved road. So a lot of us remember because of railroad tracks, right? And then it was gravel and, Green Lantern, Terra, all this kind of stuff. So said he drove us in. We passed our ohana Nanakuli, but we drove all the way in and he stopped. And this is when Monaola hadn't been, the guy was just buying the land right back then, making a big deal, and which took Kaneaki away from us until they set up all this thing about Hawaiians can always access Kaneaki. But my dad parked on Farrington Highway and it was all California grass all over. All California grass. And there were houses, but we walked in and he took me all the way up. He wouldn't carry me. And I had to walk in the grass that he had trod down. And I was only like 5 years old. And that's a long, long walk from Farrington all the way up to Kaneaki. That is very far. So he made me walk. I was hyperallergic. I still am. So the king grass cut me. I wound up with impetigo after that, but it was part of my learning. My dad would take me all over. And when we got to Kaniaki, it was overgrown. There were all kinds of things, no restoration yet, right? So I had strawberry guava, had koahale, had all kind of brush, and the grass was all over. But he told me that I needed to remember that place, that it was a special place for Mahi'ai to come because his family are Mahi'ai and Navaia, his family. But he told me to always remember. And of course, 5 years old, I don't know where I am. I only know we drove far, a long time it seemed, because we lived in Makai, drove all the way out there. Then he made me walk. My sister was still a baby. My mom and she stayed in the car, in the hot car, and we walked however long it was. And you couldn't see the pohaku, but you could feel the present. I could feel that. That's why he had been teaching me things, albeit in English, as I was growing up. So he was transferring knowledge to me, which all came together when I kept moving on and I got to Oliliki. Then I moved and got to Ka'ala. Then I went to Hua'aina. But all this time spent, it all started coming back. All the memory came back and all the intrinsic knowledge came back. It's all there. And that's what steeled me for whatever fights I was involved, whether it's through Ka'ala or of my own volition, to fight for us, to fight for our people.
Is there, when you, on that note, is there anything else before we wrap up the video that you want to share, especially about how it's impacted your personal health? Because you talked about battling cancer now. I don't know if it's for the first time, but given all of this history and how your dad's helped,
So how old are you now?
I'll be 68 next week, Tuesday.
How are you feeling?
I'm good. By the grace of God, I'm really good.
How's your mental health?
Mental health is stronger than ever. I have gone for therapy. I needed to go for therapy. Recognize that when I went through all the hell that my ex-husband put me through and the things that he did to our son, and now I can say my son, and we've survived. We've survived. So,
Your outlook on life is pretty positive.
yes. Like Walter B., we planned to be centenarians. She didn't make it. I blame the damn vaccine for that. I blame the vaccine. I had a threat because I did, UH, we had to be vaccinated. So I did take the vaccine. Then I took 2 boosters, all Pfizer, 3. The last one, I went to Longsport. They gave me Moderna. Then this whole thing came out with blood clots, I think my friend died of it. His husband is convinced she died from having taken the Moderna vaccine. Walter B., I was convinced her second set of strokes came from that because she was fully on Moderna. When I disclosed that to my doctors at Queens, they said, we're going to put you on watch. So I had to pass last year, October, to make sure, because I already have a history of heart attacks. So this is how my health is. Just being who I was, growing up the way I was, I learned to be in becoming hiapo. I've always been a type A plus personality, meaning you gotta do it, you gotta make it almost perfect. Cannot be perfect, I know, but you gotta make it as near perfect as you can. You gotta excel at everything you do. That's a lot of pressure. My father always beat that into me. You do the best you can do. Don't tell anyone, do not brag about it, but you just do it. Do it well. If you cannot do it well, don't do anything at all. Get away, get out of the way. So I was brought up with that ethic. So I've always been this and this. When I ran Ka'ala and I said, hey, we're in grant writing. You cannot leave. My resource director, I told you cannot take vacation. I'm taking vacation. I go, you can't, but by law, I cannot tell her she cannot go. It was just an ethical thing. I was so new-how with her because she took vacation, so I did all the grant writing on my own. I mean, I'm capable, but it's always nice when you're writing as a team. So those kinds of things would keep spurring me on. I had my first heart attack when I was 30. I had a series of 3, because I was newly married. My ex-husband was driving me nuts. Culture clash too, right? Coming to Hawaii, living in America, very different from living in Nepal. When we were in India and Nepal, no problem. Coming here was different. And then over the years, things changed and it just got worse. So those heart attacks set me up for a lot of other things. I have been ill most of my life because I was born with congenital anemia and thalassemia minor, thalassemia A, which means my blood cells mine are literally small, about a third the size of a normal red blood cell. So my mitochondria don't work really well. The older I got, the worse my condition got in terms of blacking out, the headaches, the body aches, the pain, everything. But my work ethic was always there. My father said, do it. I worked hard. I worked my way up. I'm a Title IX, first woodshop, female woodshop instructor in the state. First to do this, first to do that. Because you have to be good at what you did.
So
And I
now
would,
you are good.
yeah, you work through it. You work through it no matter what. And you pray all the time.
You wanna wrap it up?
So that is how my health got crazy. And same thing, after my mom died, I had to sell our house because we needed to. And I almost was homeless, but I was not. And then I took a job as a caregiver, and I love caregiving. And then I realized that, oh, I should eat. And I left my last case, and I was supposed to go to another case, and this is the time of COVID. And I thought I had COVID. So I called my boss one day and said, I can't make it to go with her to the dentist. Can you tell them I have these symptoms? And he said, get yourself to the ER, but I blacked out. Then I called a friend and said, I need help. Can you take me to the hospital? This was in October 6, 2020. And I didn't know what time it was. She came when I called her and she said, oh, I'm in my pajama. And I said, I need your help. Can you please come? You got to take me to the hospital. Take me to the hospital. Something's wrong. Maybe I have COVID. Something's wrong. I blacked out again. But I hadn't eaten for 3.5 days. I was really sick. Nothing, the bile started coming out both ends of the body. So I knew my body was in real danger. And by midnight, she got me to Wahewa ER. And I remember coming in and out, and I remember opening my eyes, and everybody was around me. I had all these tubes in, and they said, oh, Miss Subedi, we have good news for you. You don't have COVID. You don't have COVID. But they're working on me. But you are going through a massive heart attack right now. And so it's like, and I was we call it mungdong in Cantonese, mungdong. And so it's like, whoa. I remember that because there were so many people around me, and the light was so bright. And then the next day they found a place. They said, oh, we might have to take you to Castle. There are no hospital beds because of COVID. But they found me a place in Palimomi. So I was there until they diagnosed me. Infectious disease came and diagnosed me. Then the hospitalists and the other doctors came and they said, Miss Subedi, you're quite an anomaly. You're quite a case because you have a history of reaching 111-degree temperature, body. Your mind is still sound. Where are you? I told him where. Told him why. And he says, we talked to your family, we've been talking to people you know. You live a very high stress life. Well, to me, that was my life. So I didn't necessarily consider it high stress, it's just stress. Everybody has stress. But then this doctor one morning, he looks out the window and his back is to me. He says, you know what almost killed you? Stress. We all concur that even though you were highly septic, your septicemia was off the charts with this one form of E. coli, you survived that. You survived these high temperatures in your body, your brain is still intact. You are so stubborn, but you should have died. You were 10 to 15 minutes away from dying the night your friend brought you into the ER, and that was confirmed by several doctors. So living this life and trying to being involved in speaking up our voices for Mauna Kea, for Coral Ridge, for the water issues on Oahu, Maui, Molokai. All of those things mean so much because it is about the desecration of this place, which is congruent and parallels the desecration of the health of our people, right? And it's very personal. So my getting cancer, after I went through this thing in 2020, it took 5 months of PT to get back to where I could walk, feed myself, do this. And, they thought it was pretty cool. I'm pretty normal. You never do this. And then almost 5 months to the day, they said, oh, you got to take a mammogram. I took it. Oh, something's in there. You got to take another mammogram and you take the different imaging and we're going to do this. Oh, my goodness. Well, these things are unusual. We need a biopsy. So they did the biopsy. I said, can I see what it looks like, the tissue? So they always think I'm weird, but they showed me, oh, is that it? Those little orange things floating around? Well, then I came back. Well, you have these malignant tumors, but I had an infrequent case of cancer. I have bilateral synchronous cancer, which means there are 2 different types of cancers, one on each side. So I had the lumpectomy, right? So it's, only you.
You're not done yet.
No, I'm not done.
Okay.
I need to finish a project, and it's for us
You have to wait.
in Wahewa, but Wahewa is Waianae Uka. So my tie to Waianae, I was at Waianae Kai for years. Now I'm in Waianae Uka. So we span this place And it's still part of honoring my Maui past and my Maui ties. And it's for the community. And it's still based on primarily Native Hawaiian function, culture, everything, our history. So that is it. We do this. So that's why I'm still here, because I'm not done with the fight. Once I get that and it's in place and I know it can go, then I'm good.
That makes sense. Actually,
So,
great.